It's 1928, a quiet rural town blanketed in the soft glow of an early autumn morning. A woman gently holds her young son outside their modest wooden home. The air feels calm, yet there's an unease you can't quite place. His small face seems almost wrong, though she hugs him lovingly. Look closely at his eyes. Something isn't right. Stay with us till the end. The truth behind this 1928 moment will shock you, if you enjoy uncovering history's secrets. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon, so you never miss a journey into the past. The camera, or the reader's gaze, slowly shifts closer to the boy's face. At first glance, he appears like any other child of the era, his hair neatly combed, his small hands resting lightly on his mother's shoulders, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But as you look closer, something begins to feel off. His eyes, dark and unusually sharp for a boy of 7, seem to hold secrets far beyond his age. They don't just observe, they calculate, as if silently measuring the world around him. There's a depth there that unsettles, a cold glint that contrasts sharply with the warmth of his mother's embrace. The smile on his face is equally peculiar. It isn't a smile of joy, nor is it the shy curve of a typical child. Instead, it feels rehearsed, almost deliberate, as if he knows something the rest of the world does not. The corners of his mouth twitch in subtle, irregular patterns, and for a brief second, it seems less like a smile and more like a mask hiding something. Even his posture is strange. While most children relax in a parent's arms, he holds himself unnaturally still, his back rigid, his tiny fingers clutching the folds of his mother's dress with an almost mechanical precision. There's no fidgeting, no hesitation, only a meticulous stillness that clashes with the tenderness of the moment. A few neighbors passing by glance in curiosity. They comment on how polite, how well-behaved he seems, yet some feel an unexplained unease. There's an instinctual sense that something about him is different. Not wrong in a way that can be easily defined, but a subtle disruption, a tiny distortion in the natural order of things that only a sharp eye can detect. Even the sunlight seems to behave oddly around him. Shadows fall in unusual patterns on his face, accentuating features that, under normal circumstances, would be unremarkable. His eyes catch the light in a way that makes them glimmer, not with the innocence of childhood, but with something deliberate, watchful, almost knowing. It's in these quiet, fleeting details that the viewer or reader begins to feel the weight of tension. The mother smiles, oblivious to the unsettling aura, but as you linger on the boy's gaze, an uncomfortable realization forms. There is a subtle intelligence here that doesn't belong entirely to a child. Something ancient, calculating, or disturbingly aware. Something that shouldn't exist within someone so young. And as you step back, letting the moment breathe, the small details accumulate. The eyes, the posture, the unnatural stillness, the glinting smile. They combine to create a single undeniable truth. There is more to this boy than meets the eye, and the story that begins in this quiet 1928 morning is only just unfolding. The mother, Eleanor, cradles her son with an affection that seems almost instinctual, a protective warmth that emanates from her every gesture. Her hands are gentle as they brush his hair from his forehead, her lips murmuring soft reassurances. "You're safe, my love. You're always safe." Yet beneath her calm exterior, there is a flicker of unease, small, almost imperceptible, but there nonetheless. A glance over her shoulder, a tightened jaw, the brief hesitation in her voice when she speaks to passing neighbors. She tries to maintain the appearance of normalcy, laughing lightly at the occasional comment from townsfolk, nodding politely as if to say, "Everything is fine here." But inside, her mind races with questions she cannot voice. Why does he sometimes stare so intently at things no one else can see? Why do objects seem to shift around him when she isn't looking? Even when she smiles, it carries a subtle tension. Her eyes, filled with love, also betray a mother's worry, the kind that arises when one senses danger in the most familiar of places. She notices the way other children avoid him without explanation, the way the family cat hisses when he approaches. She brushes it off publicly, attributing it to coincidence or the peculiarities of small-town life. But privately, she is unnerved. Neighbors gossip quietly, though often with hesitance, as if they too feel the unspoken truth. Eleanor hears snatches of conversation as she walks through the dusty streets. "Have you noticed how quiet he is?" Or something about that boy. "I can't explain it." She nods politely, laughs softly, but her mind churns. She wonders if she is imagining it, if her instincts are betraying her sanity. The motherly instinct to protect conflicts with a creeping, unnameable fear. She observes her son's interactions closely, noting every subtle twitch of his hands, every fleeting expression. When he smiles at her, it is affectionate, yet it carries an odd precision, as if measured for effect. When he laughs, the sound is clear, childlike, yet there is a faint undertone, a subtle cadence that sets her on edge. Eleanor finds herself holding her breath during these moments, uncertain whether to rejoice in his normalcy or to fear what lies beneath the surface. At home, her private life is marked by careful observation. She watches him play in the garden, carefully monitoring his movements. He tends to the flowers meticulously, arranging them with a focus beyond his years. Sometimes she catches him staring at her with a look that feels almost accusatory, as if he is aware of her thoughts, her fears, and perhaps even her secrets. It chills her more than she wishes to admit. Despite her anxiety, Eleanor's love never wavers. She comforts him during storms, hums lullabies as he drifts to sleep, and shields him from the whispers of neighbors. Yet love is tinged with fear that her son is extraordinary in ways that could be dangerous, that his innocence may mask something far more complex. Each day becomes a balancing act, nurturing his childlike nature while cautiously navigating the unknown depths of his mind. Even her friends notice the strain. They remark on her protectiveness, perhaps attributing it to a mother's natural worry. But Eleanor knows there is more at play. She senses that the world sees only the surface, while she glimpses something deeper, something that doesn't conform to the simplicity of childhood. Every laugh, every glance, every gesture is analyzed in her mind, her maternal intuition warning her that something is lurking beneath the boy's calm exterior. At night, Eleanor lies awake, listening to the quiet house. Shadows play across the walls, and she thinks of the subtle, almost imperceptible movements she has observed, the fleeting expressions, the tiny behaviors that defy explanation. Sleep eludes her as she contemplates the mystery that is her own child. She hugs him a little tighter when he sleeps, as if by holding him close she can shield herself from the growing unease that surrounds him. Through it all, Eleanor embodies the tension of love and fear intertwined. She cherishes her son, and yet fears the unknown within him. The townsfolk see only a devoted mother. She sees a child who may be far more than he appears. It is this duality, affection and suspicion, that shapes the world around them, setting the stage for the strange and unsettling events that will unfold in the days to come. The story of the boy does not begin in this quiet 1928 morning. It begins years earlier, under circumstances that many in the town would whisper about, but few dared speak aloud. From the moment he was born, there was something peculiar about him, a subtle irregularity that set him apart from other children. His mother, Eleanor, recalled the first signs with a mixture of awe and unease. The delivery itself was unusually difficult. The midwife, an experienced woman who had seen countless births, spoke in hushed tones about the boy's piercing gaze, even as he drew his first breath. "There's something in his eyes," she said quietly, almost as if afraid to voice it too loudly. Eleanor, exhausted and overwhelmed, dismissed it as mere fatigue, Yet the unease lingered in the air. As the boy grew, small incidents began to accumulate. When he was barely 3, objects in the house seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. A chair would be moved from one corner to another. Toys would appear in places they hadn't been left. And sometimes, books would fall from shelves for no apparent reason. Eleanor tried to rationalize these occurrences, blaming her own forgetfulness or the mischievousness of her older children. Yet the pattern became undeniable. The townsfolk, too, began to notice. Whispers followed the boy wherever he went. "Did you see how he stared at the Reverend yesterday? Almost as if he knew his sins," one neighbor murmured. "He's not like other children," another would add, shaking her head. Eleanor would smile politely, deflecting the concern, but inside, she felt the gnawing anxiety of a mother who knows her child is different. By the age of 5, his intelligence and awareness were astonishing. He learned to read far earlier than most children, memorizing entire passages from books he found on the shelves. He could imitate voices, mimic expressions, and sometimes unnervingly, predict the reactions of those around him. A neighbor once remarked how the boy seemed to anticipate her every word before she spoke it, a small incident that sent shivers down Eleanor's spine. There were also moments of darkness, subtle but undeniable. The family cat, normally docile, would hiss and retreat whenever he approached. Animals in the surrounding fields avoided him, and birds would scatter inexplicably as he walked by. One evening, a flock of crows circled above the house. Not at random, Eleanor would later note, but seemingly in reaction to his presence. Small, inexplicable occurrences, each insignificant on its own, but together they painted a picture Eleanor could not ignore. Even other children felt the weight of his gaze. At the local school, his classmates would sometimes freeze under his scrutiny, uneasy and restless. Teachers remarked on his unsettling awareness, the way he seemed to observe not just what they taught, but the thoughts and emotions behind every lesson. Eleanor would receive letters from them describing the same uncanny intuition that marked his early years, an intuition that felt far beyond a child of his age. Despite all this, Eleanor's love never wavered. She tried to shield him from the fearful whispers and from the growing sense that the world was not made for him, or perhaps that he was not made for the world. Nights were spent rocking him to sleep, murmuring lullabies, and wondering what lay beneath the brilliant but unsettling mind of her son. The love was instinctive, protective, and unwavering, yet the shadow of doubt remained, a quiet acknowledgement that her child carried a burden far different from ordinary children. As the years passed, the incidents became more pronounced. Objects would move on their own with increasing frequency. Neighbors would report fleeting glimpses of him standing in places he could not possibly have reached, and animals' avoidance grew more consistent. Eleanor's vigilance intensified, but even she could not fully comprehend the depths of his awareness, the intelligence and subtle cunning that sometimes peeked through the innocent exterior. By 1928, the year of our photograph, Eleanor knew the world would never understand her son, not fully. She had come to accept the quiet truth that something extraordinary, something perhaps unsettlingly unnatural, existed within him. And though she held him lovingly in her arms that crisp autumn morning, she could feel the weight of that truth pressing silently, a secret she carried alone. The boy's expression, as calm and innocent as it seemed, was a mask that hid layers of perception, intelligence, and subtle malevolence that few could ever imagine. By 1928, Eleanor's quiet life was punctuated by incidents that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The boy's presence seemed to ripple through the small town in ways that unsettled animals, adults, and even the natural world itself. It began subtly: objects slightly out of place, doors left ajar when she was certain she had closed them, but soon the anomalies grew more frequent and impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Eleanor returned home from the market to find her kitchen in disarray. Cabinets that had been meticulously arranged were now ajar, and some of her pots had been stacked in unfamiliar patterns. At first, she thought the wind had blown through an open window, or perhaps the cat had caused the commotion. But then she noticed the boy sitting quietly at the table, his small fingers tapping in precise rhythm on the wood. His expression was calm, almost pleased, as though he were the orchestrator of the disorder. Animals reacted unpredictably around him. The family dog, once loyal and affectionate, would shrink away when he approached, tail tucked and eyes wide with unease. Chickens in the yard would scatter even before he reached the coop. Eleanor observed it all with growing concern, noting how wildlife seemed to sense something she could not define. One evening, as twilight fell across the farm, a lone deer appeared at the edge of the field, staring at the boy with unnerving intensity before bolting silently into the woods. Neighbors, too, began to feel the boy's peculiar influence. During a church gathering, several townsfolk reported feeling a chill when he passed by. Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly woman known for her skepticism, whispered to Eleanor that the boy had eyes that know more than they should. Some children avoided him entirely, while others would break into tears for no discernible reason after merely exchanging a glance. These incidents, small in isolation, collectively painted a disturbing picture. Objects moved without explanation. A sewing basket she had left on the porch would appear neatly folded inside the house. Books on the shelf would be found open to pages Eleanor had never touched. Once she discovered a small mirror in the middle of the garden, reflecting sunlight directly onto the boy's face, though it had not been placed there by anyone. The occurrences were never destructive, but each carried an air of deliberate intelligence, as if orchestrated by an unseen force. Eleanor's attempts to rationalize the events were constantly undermined by reality. One morning, she discovered footprints in the freshly raked dirt, leading to a locked shed, footprints far too small for anyone other than her son. Yet the shed had been securely locked and the latch untouched. She questioned herself, wondered if she had overlooked something, but the evidence stubbornly persisted. The boy's movements defied explanation. Even the weather seemed subtly affected by his presence. During a particularly heavy storm, Eleanor noticed that rain fell unevenly across the yard, puddles forming around the boy, while the rest of the ground remained drier. Lightning illuminated him in a way that seemed purposeful, casting elongated, exaggerated shadows that made him appear older, almost spectral. She shivered, the hairs on her neck rising as she watched him calmly stand in the center of the yard. Oblivious to the storm that raged around him, there were incidents with neighbors that bordered on the uncanny. Mrs. Whitman claimed her heirloom vase had been broken. Yet when Eleanor entered her home, she saw the boy sitting quietly nearby, the vase intact but rearranged perfectly on a table as if to demonstrate control. In another case, a man returning from the market found his tools meticulously aligned on the workbench, despite leaving them scattered in disarray. Those who encountered him often left unsettled, unsure if the boy was simply observing or subtly manipulating their world. Despite all this, the boy never displayed malice. His actions carried a quiet precision, a sense of purpose rather than mischief. Eleanor felt both awe and terror in equal measure. Her son was extraordinary, but extraordinary in a way that disturbed the natural order of her world. Each incident, each subtle anomaly, reinforced a growing truth. He was unlike any other child, and his presence alone could bend the ordinary into something unnerving, something unexplainable. The incidents were relentless, small and subtle, yet cumulative. Eleanor documented them silently in her mind, a careful record of the boy's behavior. She whispered warnings to herself at night, reminders to stay vigilant, and moments of prayer filled her thoughts, not for him, but for her understanding of what he was. The world around them had shifted imperceptibly, guided by the quiet intelligence of a boy who seemed always a step ahead, a child whose calm exterior masked a mind that was anything but ordinary. And so, as the days passed, the town's unease grew alongside Eleanor's own. Objects moved, animals reacted, neighbors whispered, and through it all, the boy remained calm, serene, his expression betraying none of the subtle power he seemed to command. The stage was set for something larger, something undeniable, a revelation that would force the town, and Eleanor herself, to confront the truth about the boy she loved. The day began like any other, the soft golden light of morning spilling across Eleanor's yard. But beneath the calm, a tension had been building, unnoticed yet inevitable. The boy sat at the edge of the garden, eyes fixed on something invisible, his small fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Eleanor watched him with the usual mixture of love and unease. Unaware that today would mark a turning point, she could not ignore Dot. It started subtly, a faint hum that seemed to emanate from the boy, barely audible but persistent. The sound resonated through the walls of the house, vibrating in Eleanor's chest. She called his name softly, but he did not respond. When she stepped closer, the air around him shimmered ever so slightly, as though reality itself hesitated in his presence. Then came the first undeniable anomaly. The family dog, which had always avoided him nervously, suddenly froze mid-step, ears pinned back, eyes wide in terror. The animals in the surrounding fields bolted, leaving trails in the morning dew. Eleanor's heart raced. Something was happening, something far beyond the subtle disturbances she had grown accustomed to. The boy's expression shifted. The carefully controlled calmness of his face fell away, replaced by an intensity that was almost frightening in its precision. His eyes, dark and deep, seemed to penetrate not only Eleanor's heart but her mind. It was as if he could see every thought she had ever had, every secret she had tried to conceal. A chill ran down her spine, and she stepped back, instinctively shielding herself. Without warning, objects around him began to move. A rake lifted slowly from the garden, spinning in a perfect arc before settling gently back on the ground. Pots clattered on the porch, yet none fell to the floor. They floated briefly before landing upright. A book slid across the table on its own, stopping precisely in front of the boy. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, and precise, as if he were orchestrating the entire world around him with a mind far beyond his years. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The boy's lips parted, and a soft, almost inaudible voice emerged, not a child's voice, but something older, deliberate, commanding. He spoke her name, not in the way a child calls to a parent, but in a tone that carried authority, certainty, and an unsettling awareness of the world beyond the ordinary. Eleanor froze, unable to respond, as if the sound itself had rooted her to the spot. Then the impossible happened. The reflection in the window caught her eye. She saw not just her son's image, but something else layered beneath it. The boy's eyes seemed to glow faintly, catching the sunlight in a way that made them appear older, almost ageless. For a fleeting moment, his face flickered, transforming, briefly, into something that felt ancient and knowing, a presence far beyond human comprehension. Eleanor's knees buckled, and she clutched the railing, tears streaming down her face, heart pounding in disbelief. Neighbors, drawn by the strange sounds and the shimmer in the air, appeared at the edge of the yard. They froze, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The boy turned toward them, and their eyes met his. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others recoiled instinctively. His gaze held a weight, a silent command that left them immobilized, as if their own wills were no longer their own. Time seemed to distort. The boy's motions slowed to an unnatural stillness, each gesture purposeful, each blink deliberate. He reached toward the floating objects, and they obeyed instantly, responding to an unseen force. The air vibrated with energy, and Eleanor realized, with a mixture of awe and terror, that her son was no ordinary child. The world itself bent subtly around him, answering his silent command. And yet there was no malice in him, only awareness. The calm precision, the deliberate manipulation of reality, was not meant to harm, but to demonstrate control over forces beyond understanding. Eleanor's mind reeled with questions she could not begin to answer. How? Why? What had she brought into the world? Her love battled with fear, but the evidence was undeniable. Her son was extraordinary in a way that defied natural law, a child whose innocence masked an intelligence and power far beyond human comprehension. Finally, the boy's expression softened. The glow faded, the floating objects settled, and the birds cautiously returned to the yard. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, trembling. She reached for him, tears wetting his small hands as she held him close. "What? What are you?" she whispered, voice breaking. The boy's smile returned, carefully measured, calm yet hinting at the depth of what lay beneath. No words came, only the quiet understanding that she was in the presence of something incomprehensible, a being of extraordinary intelligence and power, hidden beneath the guise of a child. In that moment, Eleanor realized a chilling truth. The boy she had loved, nurtured, and protected all these years was something entirely beyond ordinary life. His presence alone could reshape reality in subtle, terrifying ways, and the world had only begun to feel the effects of his awareness. The quiet town, the modest home, the gentle autumn morning, they were all now touched by forces she could not control, and the boy's true nature had finally revealed itself. Eleanor sank to the edge of the porch, her hands trembling as she tried to process the events she had just witnessed. The boy, her son, the child she had cradled since birth, was no longer simply a boy. The depth of his awareness, the control he exerted over the world around him, weighed on her heart like a stone. Love and fear collided within her, each demanding her attention, neither allowing her peace. She glanced at him, sitting quietly on the steps, his gaze calm and unreadable, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips. In that moment, she felt the full weight of responsibility pressing down on her. How could she protect him from the world and the world from him? The thought was unbearable. Her maternal instinct urged her to shield him, to hold him close and prevent others from discovering the truth. Yet another part of her, a voice trembling with doubt, whispered that perhaps this child was too powerful, too different, to remain hidden. Her mind raced through every memory, the whispers of neighbors, the strange incidents, the unexplainable events that had marked his early years. Each moment now took on new meaning, hints and warnings she had previously ignored or rationalized. She had loved him fiercely, unconditionally, but now she realized that love carried a peril she could not fully comprehend. To embrace him was to embrace something that defied natural law, something that could reshape reality itself in ways she might never predict. Sleep became a battleground for her thoughts. Nights were long, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across her walls, and she would wake to find him staring silently from the corner of his room, wide-eyed and calm, as if aware of her inner turmoil. Eleanor questioned herself endlessly. Was she doing the right thing by protecting him? Should she seek help, confide in someone, risk the judgment and fear of others? Or was isolation the only safeguard for both her son and the community around them? Her love for him was instinctual, a force that had defined her existence, yet it was tempered by a creeping dread. She could not ignore the implications of his abilities. Each incident, each unexplainable moment, reminded her that the world was not prepared for what her child represented. She thought of the townsfolk, who had already glimpsed the subtle distortions he caused, the unsettled animals, the moving objects, the whispered fears. What would they do if they truly understood the depth of his power? Panic? Fear? Worse? Eleanor's heart ached with the impossibility of her position. To treat him as ordinary would be a lie, an invitation for disaster. To isolate him completely was to risk his emotional well-being, to deny him the human contact that every child needed. She had always believed that love could conquer all, but now she faced a truth harsher than she had ever imagined. Love alone might not be enough. Her son's extraordinary nature demanded careful vigilance, constant attention, and a moral reckoning she had not anticipated. She remembered the day he had subtly manipulated the environment, the floating objects, the animals' reactions, the glow in his eyes. That single moment had crystallized her fears and hopes simultaneously. He was not malevolent, not intentionally harmful, yet the potential for chaos was inherent in his existence. Eleanor understood that her role was no longer merely that of a mother. She was guardian, witness, and steward of a being who could never be fully understood by ordinary minds. Tears streamed down her face as she sat beside him, the crisp autumn air filling the quiet space between them. She reached out, fingers brushing his cheek, and whispered words of comfort not for him, but for herself. "I will protect you. I will keep you safe. I don't know how, but I will." The boy's gaze remained calm, almost knowingly reassuring, as if he understood the turmoil she wrestled with and accepted her imperfect love without judgment. Eleanor realized then that her dilemma would never fully resolve. She could not deny him, nor could she fully reveal him. She could only guide him, nurture him, and remain vigilant against the forces, seen and unseen, that might exploit or misunderstand his extraordinary nature. Love, she now understood, was inseparable from fear. To care for him was to walk a delicate balance between devotion and dread, between hope and terror. And so, Eleanor embraced her impossible role, accepting the weight of responsibility that came with it. Her love would remain unwavering, her vigilance unceasing, and her heart would carry the secret of a boy who was far more than he appeared. She understood, in that quiet moment, that her life, and perhaps the lives of everyone around her, was irrevocably intertwined with his, and that the days to come would demand courage, wisdom, and an unshakable resolve unlike anything she had ever known. The day waned into a soft, muted dusk, the golden sunlight fading into pale gray shadows that stretched across the yard. Eleanor held her son close, the warmth of his small body pressed against hers. Yet a tension lingered in the air, an invisible weight that neither comfort nor love could fully dispel. The events of the day, the anomalies, the impossible displays of awareness and power, had left her reeling. She understood something she had always known, but had never fully acknowledged. The boy was extraordinary, and the world would never comprehend him. She glanced down at his face, expecting the familiar innocence of childhood, yet what she saw made her pause. His eyes, dark and penetrating, seemed to reflect not just the fading light, but an awareness beyond time itself. For a brief instant, the calm mask of his expression faltered, revealing a depth that was both brilliant and unsettling. A small, deliberate smile played at the corners of his lips, quiet, subtle, yet carrying the weight of something beyond ordinary understanding. Eleanor's breath caught. She loved him, fiercely and unconditionally, but even that love could not erase the unnerving truth. The boy she held harbored a presence far greater than she could fully grasp. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind rustled the autumn leaves with an unnatural stillness, and the shadows of the trees stretched longer than they should have. Eleanor noticed a crow perched on the edge of the roof, its dark gaze fixed on the boy. It did not caw. It simply watched, patient and silent, as though it too recognized the strange power emanating from him. The familiar sounds of evening, the distant chatter of neighbors, the lowing of cows, the soft murmur of the river felt muted, secondary, as if reality itself had shifted subtly to acknowledge his presence. The boy shifted slightly in her arms, resting his head against her chest. Eleanor closed her eyes, taking comfort in his warmth, yet the sense of unease persisted. Her mind replayed the strange incidents, the floating objects, the animal's behavior, the inexplicable patterns in the world around him. Each event, each subtle disruption, now felt like part of a larger truth she could not articulate. The boy's calm exterior, the faint smile, the precise movements, all of it hinted at an intelligence and awareness that defied explanation, a reality that hovered just beyond her understanding. Night fell slowly, the sky deepening into shades of blue and black. Eleanor carried her son inside, the house quiet except for their soft footsteps on the wooden floor. She placed him in his bed, tucking the covers snugly around him, and watched him sleep. His chest rose and fell steadily, and the faint glow of the moon illuminated his face. Yet even in sleep, there was an uncanny stillness, a quiet precision in his posture that left her unsettled. Eleanor knew that the child she loved so dearly was more than he appeared, extraordinary presence cloaked in innocence. She left the room, closing the door gently behind her, and paused in the hallway. Shadows stretched across the walls, and for a moment she imagined them moving, bending subtly, as though responding to the boy's silent will. Her heart pounded, a mixture of love, fear, and awe. She understood that her life, the life of her family, and perhaps even the small town around them, would forever be shaped by the boy she cradled, the boy who was not entirely human in comprehension, though human in form. Eleanor returned to the kitchen, sitting by the window, and gazed at the fading night. She whispered softly to herself, a promise and a warning intertwined. I will protect you, no matter what. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faint rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a night bird. Somewhere in the darkness, a shadow moved, silent and deliberate. Eleanor felt it, the subtle presence of her son's awareness, even when he slept. She understood then that the story was far from over, that the world had merely glimpsed the edge of something extraordinary, something unfathomable. And as the house settled into quiet, Eleanor realized the chilling truth. The boy she loved, the boy she had held close since birth, would forever be a mystery. His expression, calm and serene, hinted at knowledge beyond her reach. The night closed around them, silent, yet charged with a tension that would not dissipate. The boy slept, but the world, and Eleanor herself, would never truly rest again.